In the last episode of this series, we found that Clint Bowyer would outlast the weird and chaotic 2012 playoffs to win his first NASCAR championship. Now, today in the 10th episode of this 13-part series, we take a look at how the 2013 season would have played out under the playoff format. Remember that this is just a hypothetical scenario. I know they would have raced differently. This is just for fun. So let's see who would make up the 2013 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series playoff grid. Starting off, the first to be locked in would be Jimmie Johnson with wins at the Daytona 500, Martinsville, Pocono, and Daytona again. Carl Edwards was in with wins at Phoenix and Richmond. Matt Kenseth, in his first year with JGR, would punch his ticket in with wins at Las Vegas, Darlington, Kentucky, and Bristol. Kenseth had originally won at Kansas, but due to a penalty, the win would be given to Kasey Kahne, who was in with his victories at Bristol, this Kansas race, and Pocono. Kyle Busch was back, with wins at Auto Club, Texas, and Watkins Glen, as well as Atlanta. Kevin Harvick would make it after winning Richmond and the Coke 600. The biggest upset of the season would be David Ragan's win at Talladega, meaning that he would return to the playoffs. Greg Biffle's Michigan win got him in the show, while Martin Truex Jr.'s streak-snapping win at Sonoma aided his playoff return. Ryan Newman also made it with his win at Indianapolis, and Joey Logano would be the final driver to make it off of wins at Michigan. Tony Stewart would have made it in, but after his injury ending his season, I'm going to bet that NASCAR would open up a spot in his place. And Brian Vickers would not be eligible with his New Hampshire win due to being an Xfinity regular who ran part-time in Cup. So with 11 winners, this meant that 5 drivers made it in off of points, these being Dale Earnhardt Jr., Clint Bowyer, Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski, and Jeff Gordon. Remember Gordon being the final driver to make it in due to Stewart's injury. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, the grid would be set like this as the round of 16 began. The first round would go to Chicagoland, New Hampshire, and Dover. At Chicagoland, rain would be a factor, and due to the colder temperatures of the night, engine issues would soon become playoff and championship issues. Both Joey Logano and Dale Earnhardt Jr. would be behind the 8 ball after blowing engines at Chicago. Meanwhile, Matt Kenseth would lock up his spot to the next round, winning the race. As the field moved on to New Hampshire, the grid would look like this, and at New Hampshire, Matt Kenseth would once again win, adding more playoff points to his total. At the same time, Kyle Busch and Jimmie Johnson ran well enough to lock themselves into the next round on points alone. Meanwhile, Kasey Kahne's poor showing aided into the growing number of drivers tiptoeing their way around the cut line. David Ragan would basically be eliminated after the second stage at Dover, while Kurt Busch and Carl Edwards both had poor showings that left them out. Both Dale Jr. and Joey Logano showed up competitively, but it was the 88 team who would outlast the 22, living to fight another day after falling just short in a duel for the win with teammate Jimmie Johnson at Dover. So heading into the round of 12, the grid would look like this. The round of 12 would take place at Kansas, Charlotte, and Talladega. Ryan Newman would have the first major falter, finishing 35th after a wreck at Kansas. At the end of the day, the gap would turn out to be too much to overcome in the round. Meanwhile, Kevin Harvick locked up a spot in the round of 8 with a win. Heading to Charlotte, favorite Brad Keselowski was stuck below the cut line. He would end up being the only driver under this line to improve his championship standing at Charlotte, as he would win and join Happy Harvick in the round of 8. The win would shift the cut line framing heading into Talladega, as now 31 points would separate 9th place Clint Bowyer from 8th place Dale Earnhardt Jr. Now, I'd like to say that Talladega would shuffle the grid, that it would be crazy, nothing like it, but nothing ever materialized. Bowyer, Biffle, and Newman were complete non-factors, as the majority of the race was controlled by Jimmie Johnson, Matt Kenseth, and Dale Earnhardt Jr., the 8th place driver. The race would be won by a non-playoff guy in Jamie McMurray as well, meaning no miracle win would take place. So the grid reset again, with 8 drivers this time. The round of 8 would take place at Martinsville, Texas, and Phoenix. Jeff Gordon, the guy who barely made it in as a 16th seed, would be the first to lock in his championship trip to Miami with his first win of the season at Martinsville. Behind him in the points, the grid remained a bit spread out due to the large difference in playoff points earned. So heading to Texas, there was potential, and this potential was seeming to be unlocked. Kevin Harvick's 8th place run was enough to give him a 1-point advantage over Kyle Busch for the 4th and final spot. But not too far back, because of a 2nd place finish and many stage points, Dale Jr. was propelled to only 3 points behind Harvick. Brad Keselowski was not much further back in 7th, only 14 points behind Harvick. The only sure way to get to Miami as a contender was to do what Jimmy Johnson did at Texas: win. So, heading to Phoenix, there would be 2 spots up for grabs between 6 drivers. Kyle Busch's good but not great run would keep him out, while Kasey Kahne and Brad Keselowski would remain up front and Kahne would finish up front. It was not enough to get to the other contenders in points. 3 drivers really would be fighting for these 2 spots: Matt Kenseth, Kevin Harvick, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Really, Kenseth was safe even with a dismal 23rd place run. And even though Dale Earnhardt Jr. ran up front all day and finished 4th, it would be all for nothing, as Kevin Harvick would knock off a clutch victory at Phoenix. So the championship at Homestead would be settled between Jimmy Johnson, Matt Kenseth, Kevin Harvick, and Jeff Gordon. The opening 160 laps would see Matt Kenseth dominate, with the 2 Hendrick teammates in hot pursuit. Because of caution, strategy, and crazy late race restarts, the field would be jumbled around a bit. In it, the only one to nearly fully recover of the Final 4 was Matt Kenseth. He would end the season in a tight battle for 2nd on track with his former 2000 rookie opponent Dale Earnhardt Jr. And with the other 3 running 9th, 10th, and 11th, it would be enough. Matt Kenseth would be the 2013 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series playoff champion. It would be his 2nd playoff title and 3rd overall. The 2013 playoffs was an odd one to say the least. Once again, every driver that made it in had made it in before. Jeff Gordon, the guy who barely made it in due to Stewart's misfortunes, would be in the Final 4. If he isn't in and Stewart was able to be in, that battle for 2nd at the end of the race between Matt Kenseth and Dale Earnhardt Jr. would have had a whole lot more importance, because it would have been not only for 2nd on track, but for the championship. Instead, Earnhardt finished 5th, scoring the most points of a non-Final 4 driver and the most for that spot since Kurt Busch did in 2004. 13 drivers in the playoffs won a race throughout the season, with Dale Earnhardt Jr., Clint Bowyer, and Kurt Busch being the only 3 to go winless. The Final 4 won 17 of the 36 races. Gordon once, Harvick 4 times, and Johnson and Kenseth both won 6. 3 of these drivers kept a streak alive of being in every single playoffs. Matt Kenseth, Jimmy Johnson, and Jeff Gordon were the ones to do so. Jimmy Johnson was the only one so far that's qualified for every Final 4 in the last 10 seasons. Tony Stewart's 9-year streak ended with his broken leg. Kurt Busch and Greg Biffle were the only 2 real-life top 10 points drivers that didn't finish in the top 10 in the playoffs. They were replaced by 8th place Brad Keselowski, who didn't even make the chase in 2013, and 10th place Martin Truex Jr., who, because of many odd circumstances, also didn't make the chase in 2013. As for the bottom of the grid, David Ragan would post the worst playoff performance ever, scoring 2,087 points, 38 points lower than the previous worst ever of 2,125 points by Ryan Newman in 2006. And he was 113 points below the highest 16th place finishing driver ever, and David Rudimann's 2,200 points in 2010. So, with all of this being presented and laid out, I want to pass this to you. What did you think of the 2013 NASCAR playoffs? Leave a comment down below. Leave a like too, and subscribe for more great NASCAR content if you can. And until next time, have a good one.